Madam President, ladies and gentlemen. The Commission is, as you know, committed to promote and protect human rights in all our engagement with third partners, including, of course, Vietnam, whom we are discussing tonight. To this aim, we organised a stakeholders consultation in May, earlier this spring, and the summary paper of the discussion published thereafter highlights the stakeholders' suggestions for improving the situation of human rights issues and underlines our commitment to transparency and to regular and continued engagement with civil society. I can confirm that issues related to human rights have been addressed in the context of the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement negotiations, with the aim of embedding respect for human rights in the agreement and also with a view of enhancing its positive impacts and minimising the risk of adverse impacts. And I have personally discussed matters also with the Minister. The preamble of the agreement reaffirms the EU and Vietnam's commitment to key international human rights principles and instruments. There is also an institutional and legal link between the Free Trade Agreement and the Partnership and Cooperation Agreement with Vietnam. And this link ensures that respect for human rights underpins EU-Vietnam bilateral relations, including the FTA, and enables us to take measures considered as appropriate in case there is a breach of the agreement. Also, the FTA contains provisions ensuring transparency and inclusiveness of the decision-making progress and in legal proceedings, thereby strengthening the enabling environment for the respect of human rights, democracy and the rule of law in Vietnam. With regard to labour rights, the FTA includes an ambitious chapter on trade and sustainable development, and that includes not only respect for all core labour standards and ratification of fundamental ILO conventions and their implementation, but it also pays special attention to corporate social responsibility and fair and ethical trade schemes. The monitoring of human rights development in Vietnam is, of course, very important. This will continue to be done primarily through the institutions and structures set up in the PCA framework, including the human rights dialogue, and there will be a meeting in a couple of weeks again. And we also have a dedicated instrument, the European Instrument for Democracy and Human Rights, as you all know. The implementation of the commitments undertaken will be followed up in both the EU and Vietnam through the mechanisms and institutions established therein, as well as through the existing EU civil society dialogue and with evaluations of the FTA, ex post evaluations. I strongly believe that, and I think Mr. Lange said the same, that trade liberalisation and human rights can and must go hand in hand. The new communication on trade and investment that the Commission published a couple of weeks ago makes it clear that EU trade policy must be for all citizens, consumers, workers, self-employed, small, big and medium-sized companies, and the poorest people in the developing countries. It must deliver growth, jobs and innovation, but it has to be responsible. And that means that EU trade policy must defend European values. It has to be effective at delivering the economic opportunities, and it has to be transparent and open to public scrutiny. And human rights are therefore very important of this part of this trade strategy. The Commission wants to ensure that trade policy contributes to the advancement of human rights in the EU and in third countries, in conjunction with our other policies, foreign policy, development cooperation. And let me assure you that finding this balance between engagement and conditionality, the Commission is, as you know, convinced that a policy of engagement is more effective than a policy exclusively based on conditionality, even if that can also play a role. Engagement allows us to engage and to create channels for dialogue and keeping them open with a lot of stakeholders involved. And we intend to make full use of those channels to promote change on the ground in Vietnam. And thank you very much for your contribution to this, and you can make sure that we will keep you informed very closely about the development once the agreement is finally concluded. Thank you very much, Madam President.